Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Holly Tyson, the Chief People Officer of Cushman & Wakefield. Holly is responsible for guiding the people strategy for their 50,000 global employees. Prior to Cushman & Wakefield, she was the CHRO at Zebra Technologies, a $4.5 billion hardware and software technology company. Prior to that, she was the CHRO at Dick's Sporting Goods, and even before that, at the Brinks Company. Holly, it is truly a treat to have you here on campus. Thank you very much.
I'm thrilled to be here.
One of the things we get asked a lot is how will AI, Gen AI in particular, change the HR model in some way or specific HR roles? Do you see it actually changing the HR model?
I think some of the caliber of the work that we do is going to elevate. So there's always been the part of HR that I call smiles and files, right? The administrative personnel side, starting with payroll, and a lot of it is answering questions. That over time with the Ulrich model and moving to the COEs and then moving those COEs to offshoring locations. We've got a lot of service centers in Manila and Budapest and India, and I believe that some of that more administrative work will be able to be automated so that the people who are doing that work can elevate and actually add more value. There's absolutely productivity opportunities for the HR function, and I think it's a good opportunity for the people who have started out in those administrative roles to elevate and add more value based on higher level value chain work.
Do you see it changing anything structurally? I mean, you still have HR business partners. Will they suddenly be responsible for many more partners?
I think one of the questions we're going to have, and I don't have the answer for it, I think as we think about the whole role of human resources, right? The humanity is going to endure, but the connectivity with the AI, robotics, Gen AI, that's changing. And so, how does this role change with it to be, the workforce resources, the work resources, how does work get done? Because some of that is going to be with humans and some of that is going to be with computers, technology, AI, robotics. And I think that's a question for the future, right? And I do believe that the linkage between HR and technology it's been important, but now with this kind of consolidation of these resources together, if we're not 100% connected, something's going to fall apart. So it's a question I have, yeah.
Really switching directions entirely. You have been a CHRO in a number of different industries. What are things that maybe as from the head of HR that are really similar or really different as you move across industries?
Yeah. I've worked in about 7 different industries, so finance, insurance, pharmaceuticals, logistics, retail, technology, and now real estate. Is that 7? And the vast majority is the same, right? The business is business. I mean, you think about an MBA program or a master's in HR. I mean, you don't go to a master's in HR in logistics. You go to a master's in HR. You don't do MBA for retail. You do MBA because there are certain business truths that are consistent across industries, and that endures. What is different across each industry is actually how they make money, and I think that's been one of the fun parts of switching industries is learning what is truly unique. And really understanding how that might differ from what is kind of a standard, product, price, purpose, people, place, and what is really unique. What's interesting is, where I am now at commercial real estate, and I had something similar when I was in the logistics business, where the pricing of our service was anchored to something that was outside of our control. most times in businesses, like we have a product, even if it's a service, we're like, well, how are we going to price this? What's the value to the customer, right? And it took me a while, and I didn't give it as much due as it deserved when I first joined, in terms of real estate, for example. If we have advisors that are going to help you buy or sell this building, the value of the building drives the value of how much that advisor and how much the company is going to make. And the value of the building is actually really linked to things that are outside of our control. Interest rates, GDP, workforce, location, things that are really outside of our control. And it took me a while to really internalize that. And I'm glad I did, but I should have realized it earlier. Same thing when I was at the Brinks Company. We made money based on, it was cash in transit. You have money in a truck, and you move money in a truck from one place to another. That's the business model. And how we priced it was something we called ad valorem, which nobody's ever heard of. But it's basically, you got a percentage, a very, very small percentage of the money that was in the truck at the time you transported it. And I remember distinctly the day in 2015 when the Venezuelan bolivar devalued. So it collapsed. And we had it was our biggest country in terms of our revenue. And we lost 25% of our company revenue in one day, because the value of the money we were transporting, that our pricing was based on, disappeared. And so those types of things, that is not something you're going to learn in business school, right? And so those are the unique things that as I go into a new industry, is I look for the pattern recognition of what is the same everywhere. And then I really look for the things now, and I didn't always, that tell me why this is unique. Tell me what is in our control, and tell me what's not in our control. And that's been really helpful.
So as you get started, whether it's a new industry, just new company, what are some of those first steps that you do?
Yeah. I think I try to take it on two fronts. One is get as close to the customer as possible. So one of my favorite stories is when I started at Dick's Sporting Goods as the head of HR. Before I let them announce me, because then your picture goes out, right? For 3 weeks, nobody knew I was with the company, and I did kind of undercover. I went to 3 different stores, and I worked as a frontline associate. And that's when you really understand the business. I was face to face with the customers. They stuck their stinky feet in my face and had me tie their shoelaces. And how you get treated as a store associate was really, really important. And I took those 3 weeks of experience with me throughout my 4 years at that company, and actually started a program that we called Take the Field, where every executive had to spend at least a week in a store, just every year, just to let's not forget where your bread is being buttered, right? This is where the money is made. And so that's, one example. That's harder to do if you join during a pandemic, or, in my current company, we've got 53,000 employees, but about 12,000 of them are janitors. And I spent, a full day as a janitor at one of our locations, not because I needed to learn it, but because I wanted to. Well, I learned some things, but I wanted to remind myself of the really hard work that so many of our employees put in every day, because that's my job, is to remember that, right? So that's one thing, as I get close to where the customer is and where we make money and the jobs that the vast majority of people are doing. The other piece is I get super close to finance. And in particular, the head of financial planning and analysis, FP&A. I really make sure that I understand, and they explain to me, how does this company, recognize revenue? How does this company go from GAAP to non-GAAP results? What are the adjustments, and what are the pieces that go from top line to bottom line? And then what's below EBITDA? How are we going from EBITDA to EPS? And really understand what the unique decisions are for our businesses. In my current company, we've got 6 different business units, so it is different in each of those different business units. And having someone who I can pick up and be like, all right, I'm crazy here, or remind me what we're doing here, that's super important for me.
And how about, what's the CHRO's role, or your role in particular, with the board of directors?
I think it differs by board, right? So I'm in my 4th. I'm in my 4th company board, and actually our board now has just had a pretty big turnover. We have a new chairman who just started last week. And so I think that gets negotiated is too strong a word, but that gets kind of filtered and figured out at the beginning of particularly each chairman. Ram Charan and Dennis Carey and someone else wrote a book a couple of years ago called The New TSR. So TSR being total shareholder return, but this is about talent strategy and risk. And I love the way it actually encapsulates the role that the board plays and the role that not only the CEO but the CHRO and obviously the CFO play in helping them determine what is going to help them create long-term value for shareholders. And I use that kind of as a good roadmap for what is most important. The easy things, Anthony, are, it's not easy to do, but it's easy to say, is, executive compensation and CEO and executive succession. Those are kind of the stalwart knowns across companies. And then based on what is most important to the chairman and to the board, other pieces in terms of culture and talent. What I like about executive comp is that it can often be the tail wagging the dog a little bit in terms of clarifying what our strategy is and what is really most important for our shareholders. It often gets played through in the decisions that the board makes on what are we going to pay executives to do. And so it's a distilling function on what is most important, because you shouldn't be comping people on like the kitchens.
The Charlie Tharp version of messaging.
Yes.
Telling people.
That's right. Yeah. It's what's most important. What's most important is what you get paid to do. And so oftentimes that can be used as a forcing function for prioritization. And I very much enjoy playing that role in the organization.
And how do you define a good relationship with a CEO? What's a good CHRO-CEO relationship?
I'm on my 8th. So, and I believe 5 of those were first-time CEOs when I joined with them. And I think it's different for each. I think if I look, Anthony, across the different relationships I've had across the CEOs, the biggest piece is when you know that you are the person they call, right? My CEO right now, she lives in New York, and she will call me on her commute in. That's a good signal, right? I want to be the person they call when they are ruminating, when they're thinking, when they're dreaming, when they're challenging, when they're wringing their hands. Not just about the people, culture, talent, but about the business strategy, about what is about the board dynamics, about the employee relationships, all of it. Most of the things on a CEO's mind, it's a really lonely job, right? And I was just saying this to the class, the CEO is a really lonely job. The only job that's lonelier is the CHRO, right? Because you get to be their person, right? But the buck stops with you. There's no one I can be like, oh, let me tell you what she talked about, right? So I believe that when you have that relationship, and where the CEO is coming to you as a business advisor, I think that is a good signal. One other thing is, I've had CEOs say, oh, well, you should go run a P&L. Like, you're a business person. You shouldn't be in HR. You're a business person. Like, exactly. I'm a business person, and HR is a business function. And if you expect anything less than that, it is my job to educate you and to show you that HR, when it is done the way best companies benefit from it, it's business first with a talent skill set. And that has been, I think, a key differentiator.
And how does a CHRO go about developing that super strong relationship with CEOs?
Remember that each person is a person first, right? I think sometimes the positional power of a CEO can be intimidating, and oftentimes, CEOs themselves and their demeanor can be intimidating, right? And so, to kind of steel yourself not to be intimidated, that takes a lot of internal fortitude. But I think it's starting first and foremost of what's important to you, If you're running a company, you're going to be here 5, 10 years. What's the legacy you want to leave? What keeps you up at night? What do you feel are your biggest strengths that we should be highlighting? What do you feel are your biggest challenges that we need to be supplementing? And how do we make sure that we keep the end in mind together, and then help make decisions all along the way that keep that legacy, that impact for the company personally, professionally, kind of at the top of the, as our guiding post. I think that has been successful, is remembering that, I've known a lot of CEOs. No CEO is 100% ready for the job when they take the job, right? That's, if they are, then we've waited too long. They're too ripe on the vine. So recognizing that everyone is in their own growth journey, and making sure that they know you are in the foxhole with them, that you are there to help them be as successful as possible, to make the company as successful as possible, and making them feel like it's a safe place for them to be, vulnerable, ruminate, and share their thoughts, knowing it's in a vault.
And what is the CHRO's role in helping develop that executive leadership team?
I think the executive leadership team, again, I think that's different wherever you go. I see it on two kind of fronts. One is helping each executive be as successful as possible in their current role. So, and that is kind of, that's on the job experience. It's not about going to classes. It's talk to me about what is most important for you right now, or what are the biggest challenges. And it's usually about a competitive landscape, a talent issue, a capability issue, and helping them problem solve in the moment. Oftentimes being able to lay out different options and alternatives with the pros and cons. But I believe that the most effective HR people aren't just pro-con people. Like, well, you can do this and this will happen, or you can do that and this will happen. What do you want to do? I usually go to, you could do this, you could do this. Here's what I would do. And that is a data point that they can take or leave. But my experience has been that it gives the executive who ultimately has the decision to make, it gives them a sense of, when I say I'd recommend B, do they immediately bristle, in which case they think you should do A? Right? Or they'd be like, yeah, and then they go with it. And it can sometimes be, again, another forcing factor to help them make decisions. So that's one piece, is helping them develop on the job. People develop on the job. Like, that is how people develop. The other piece is helping each of the executives be an enterprise leader. So in my current company, we have what we call the EXCO, the executive committee. It's 7 of us. And we get together twice a week. And it will be as long as we need it to be. And we are all around the globe, so it's usually a virtual call, but it's on calendar for an hour, and sometimes it could be a half hour, sometimes it could be 3 hours. It is what is salient and important at that point in time. It's every Tuesday and Thursday. And in those meetings, you don't know who's the head of the P&L, who's the head of legal, who's the head of HR, who's finance, who's the other head of the P&L. We all rise up and out to make informed choices, decisions, and have points of view.
So you're really working as a team.
We're really working as a team, yes. And that's how I think we coach each other, is to elevate and operate as an executive team of the company.
Now, just one last question for you, and that is simply, when you start as a CHRO somewhere, what do you think success will be? How do you think of success as a CHRO?
I believe that the success of anyone at the senior level of the company in that EXCO is determined by how successful the company is. Period. I mean, a lot of speculation is, well, what are the companies that have the best HR? The companies that have the best HR are the best companies. And so that's the ultimate results of share price and an impact, and the employee experience, and the productivity, and how successful you are in the market. That, to me, is really the only results that matter. And how you get there are a whole bunch of different ways to get there. But at the end of the day, is the company successful based on the goals that we set out for ourselves? And nothing else actually matters from my standpoint.
Perfect. It is really always a treat for me. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here at South Carolina. We really appreciate having you down here.
My sincere pleasure. Thank you so much.
You just listened to another CHRO Conversation. Today, Holly Tyson of Cushman & Wakefield shared, among a number of topics, her views regarding how HR helps drive business success. If you'd like to hear more of Holly's thoughts, I recommend listening to JP Elliott's Future of HR podcast, episode number 3, for his interview with Holly. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.